It's amazing what a single day can tell you about an entire country. And we're about to find out. Today, we're going to take a snapshot of just one day, August 29th, 2025, to really dig into the major pressures testing Canada, all at the same time. And really, we're going to frame this whole explainer around that one big question. Because on this day, you've got this, well, it's like a perfect storm of economic, diplomatic, and social headwinds, all slamming into Canada at once. And what's so fascinating here is how a few news headlines, ones that might look totally unrelated on the surface, actually, they weave together. They tell one single, really complex story about where the country is right now. So let's connect those dots.
Okay, so we're going to start with the economy, right? Because honestly, these numbers, they're the key to understanding everything else. This is kind of the engine room for the whole story we're telling today.
So, the biggest headline of the day, it's now official. After 2 straight quarters of negative growth, the data confirms it. Canada is in a technical recession. The debate is pretty much over. The numbers are in.
And this number, wow, it really shows you how serious this is. The economy actually shrank at an annualized rate of 1.6% in the second quarter. And that's the first major economic blow we're going to look at.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Look at the gap between what was expected and what actually happened. I mean, economists saw a decline coming, sure, but the reality was almost 3 times worse. And the big question is why, right? Well, it comes down to a massive 7.5% plunge in exports, mostly because of those U.S. tariffs hitting key Canadian sectors like cars and steel. But believe it or not, this could have been so much worse. And the reason it wasn't is right here. There was this powerful cushion from inside the country. You had strong spending from regular Canadians, from homebuilders, and even from the government itself. All of that basically propped up the economy and stopped it from falling off a cliff. Now, that government spending we just talked about, well, it comes at a cost. And that brings us to our second big economic hit of the day. The federal deficit for the first quarter has ballooned to over $3.3 billion. So let's break this down, because there's a real push and pull happening. Spending is up, yeah, but revenues are also up a little bit. But just look at that last line. Import duties are up by a staggering 183%. Now, that's not because the import market is booming. No way. That's the financial echo of the trade war. Specifically, it's from Canada's own counter-tariffs on American goods. And when you take that huge export plunge and you add in those counter-tariffs, well, they both point to the third and maybe the most important economic pressure point of all. This ongoing, unresolved trade dispute with the United States. Now, this economic pressure, it's not happening in some kind of bubble, right? It's actively forcing Canada to make some really deliberate moves on the world stage. And what you're seeing is a story of diplomatic adaptation, of trying to find a new footing. And you can see that strategy playing out right here. On the one hand, you've got relations with the U.S. that are just stalled. Canada tried a conciliatory move, lifting tariffs, but it just didn't work. We're still seeing $28 billion in exports getting hit with duties. But then, on the other hand, look at this. Canada is actively trying to mend fences with India. They're ending a 10-month diplomatic freeze, appointing new envoys. It's a classic pivot trying to balance things out. Of course, not everyone is on board with this strategy. There are plenty of critics who are saying, look, this approach with the U.S., it's just not working. The argument is that it's leaving some really vital Canadian industries totally exposed and vulnerable. Okay, so we've been talking about these big, high-level things, economics, global politics, but what does all this pressure actually feel like on the ground for everyday people? Let's zoom in a bit and take a look at the view from the street. It's a really simple question, but the answers tell you so much. When you see all this economic data pointing down, how do we change our behavior? Well, here's one really clear sign. Over 60 major retailers have already kicked off their big Labor Day sales. Now, this isn't just about celebrating the holiday early. It's a huge signal that businesses are feeling the pinch. They know consumers are being more cautious, watching every dollar, and they're desperate to get them in the door with deals. But it's not just about shopping habits. There are other, maybe deeper, signs of social strain showing up. There's this one story coming out of Toronto that has totally captured the national conversation. And it isn't directly about economics, but as you'll see, it's connected to everything. So, a video went viral. It shows a man washing his clothes in a public fountain.
And it has sparked this really difficult but absolutely necessary national debate. It's making people confront some really tough questions about homelessness, about the state of our cities, about how strong our social safety nets really are. In a way, it's like a mirror being held up, showing the cracks that start to appear when a whole nation is under this much pressure.
And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? You've got the economic recession, this really tricky trade situation, the diplomatic pivots, and these signs of social strain right on the streets. These aren't separate stories at all. They're all just different sides of one single, incredibly challenging moment for Canada. So all of this leaves us with one final fundamental question. Are we just looking at a temporary storm that's going to pass? Or does all this, the recession, the trade wars, the social strain, does it represent a brand new and much more difficult reality for Canada? That's really the question this One Day in 2025 is asking, and it's definitely something to think about.